Rain hammered against the rusted metal rails, turning the ground beneath them into a mirror of trembling puddles. The sound of a distant train echoed faintly, like thunder crawling closer. A German shepherd, drenched, trembling, one paw caught between two cold steel tracks, whined helplessly as the wind whipped around him. His fur was soaked to the bone, eyes darting left and right in blind panic as the vibration beneath the ground began to grow stronger. At that moment, a young man named Ion was sprinting along the muddy path beside the tracks, his lungs burning, shoes slipping in the wet earth. He had seen the dog minutes ago, trapped, motionless, frozen in fear. And now the train horn tore through the storm, a deafening warning. Every instinct screamed that it was too late. But there was something in the shepherd's eyes. Not just fear, but a silent plea for life. Ion's legs refused to stop. His heart pounded like a second heartbeat to the train's approach. 10 seconds, maybe less, rain, noise, mud, a man running toward death, and a dog who still believed in a miracle. The story begins there. Show your love, hit like, share, and subscribe for more. The sky had turned the color of Ion long before the first drop fell. By the time Ion left the narrow road that cut through the open fields, the rain had begun to pour in sheets, wild, slanted, and merciless. His wipers struggled to keep up. Each sweep revealed a flash of the world before vanishing again under another layer of water. The hum of his old Suzuki's engine sounded hollow against the thunder's growl. He was 27, exhausted from another late evening at work, thinking only of warmth, dry clothes, and the promise of sleep. But the world had other plans. He slowed the car as a bend in the road approached, headlights slicing through the storm. The railway crossing was just ahead, one of those lonely stretches where the tracks ran endlessly into the horizon. Normally, he would have driven straight across, but something, a faint flicker of motion near the rails, caught his eye. It wasn't clear through the rain, just a shape. Small, still. Then a sound came, barely audible through the drum of the downpour, a whimper. A single, trembling cry that didn't belong to the storm. Ion frowned, his hand hesitating on the gear stick. He lowered the window slightly. Cold air and water rushed in, biting his skin. The sound came again, fragile and broken, like someone calling for help underwater. His heartbeat quickened, that strange instinct that sometimes whispers before reason speaks. He pulled over to the side, grabbed his phone for light, and stepped out into the storm. The wind slapped him the moment he opened the door. It carried the sharp scent of wet earth and iron, the metallic tang of the railway line mingling with the rain. Each step he took squelched into mud. He held the phone's flashlight high, scanning the tracks. The beam trembled with his hand, illuminating puddles, stones, and the endless stretch of steel. For a second, there was nothing, only the sound of the storm. And then, between the glimmer of the rails, he saw it, dog, a German shepherd. Its fur, once golden and proud, was now a matted mix of mud and rain. One of its front paws was wedged between the cold, slippery rails. The animal was trembling, panting in panic, its eyes wide and glassy. The sight hit Ion like a punch to the chest. The helplessness, the pain, the sheer fear. The dog tried to pull away, but each attempt only made it cry out louder. The sound carried through the storm, raw and pleading. Ion froze for a heartbeat, torn between disbelief and urgency. A train could come at any time. He knew this stretch. Freight trains thundered through at irregular hours. The thought sliced through him, sharper than the rain. He didn't think anymore. He simply ran. The mud grabbed at his shoes as he stumbled toward the dog, nearly slipping twice before reaching the tracks. The shepherd snapped its head toward him, growling weakly, the sound of an animal too scared to trust, too desperate to fight. Hey, easy, Ion said, his voice barely audible over the wind. It's okay, buddy, I'm here. He crouched, the rain soaking through his shirt instantly, fingers trembling as he reached for the paw. It was wedged deep, twisted between metal and wood. Oh God, he muttered under his breath. The dog tried to pull back again, yelping in pain. No, Ion whispered, his tone turning softer. Don't move, okay? I'll get you out. The flashlight beam danced over the rails, glinting off the dog's eyes. For a brief moment, Ion saw the reflection of himself, drenched, terrified, and determined. He pressed his fingers beneath the paw, wincing as the animal's body tensed. The metal was freezing, biting into his skin. He tried to lift, but the track held firm. He could feel the trembling in the shepherd's muscles. The creature was exhausted. "You've been here for hours, haven't you?" he murmured. The dog let out a soft, broken sound, half a whimper, half a sigh, as if answering. Then, faintly, through the rain and thunder, another sound entered the night. A distant horn low, prolonged, a train. Iron's blood ran cold. He turned his head toward the horizon. Two faint lights shimmered in the distance, growing larger with each second. "No, no, no." He looked back at the dog, whose eyes had gone wide with renewed panic. "Stay still. Please," he said, forcing his voice to stay calm, though every cell in his body screamed to run. He could already feel the vibration under his knees, a ghostly tremor crawling through the rails. He gritted his teeth and tried again. "Come on, come on." His fingers searched for a gap, pushing, twisting, feeling for movement. The dog whimpered louder, rain mixing with tears he didn't realize were falling from his own eyes. He felt the paw shift slightly. Hope surged. "That's it. Just a little more." The horn blared again, much closer now, drowning his words. He could see the headlights clearly, slicing through the curtain of rain. The world shrank to that narrow space between life and death. A man, a dog, and the seconds slipping away. Iron jammed his hands under the track, ignoring the pain as the metal scraped his knuckles raw. "Come on," he shouted, voice cracking. The shepherd cried out, then suddenly, a shift, a pop, and the paw came free. For an instant, time stopped. The dog stumbled backward, collapsing against the mud, too weak to stand. Iron's relief was cut short by the roar of the approaching train. He looked up. The lights were blinding now, the noise filling his chest like thunder from within. He had no time to think. He grabbed the dog around its wet body and pulled. His shoes slipped on the mud. He fell, then scrambled again, dragging both of them away from the rails. The world blurred, flashes of light, sound, wind. They tumbled onto the side just as the train thundered past, a wall of iron and noise. The ground shook violently, sparks flew from the wheels. The gust of air pushed him flat into the mud, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. For a few endless seconds, there was only the deafening roar, then silence. The train was gone. Iron lay there, chest heaving, the dog pressed against him. Rain fell softly now, lighter, almost gentle. He turned his head and saw the shepherd looking back at him, eyes wide but alive. The dog gave a faint, trembling whine, and for the first time since the night began, Iron laughed. A shaky, tearful sound of disbelief. "You're okay," he whispered. "You're okay." And in that rain-soaked, trembling moment, two lives, both bruised, both frightened, found each other on the edge of a miracle. For a long breath after the train vanished into the dark, the night felt hollowed out, as if sound itself had fled. The rails trembled like the last shiver of a nightmare. Iron stayed face down in the cold mud, his cheek pressed to the earth, the taste of metal and wet soil on his tongue. He could feel the dog's ribs beneath his arm, rising, falling too fast and too shallow. Rain drilled a steady rhythm against his neck. He didn't move. He was afraid that if he shifted even an inch, the fragile luck of what had just happened would snap like thin wire. When he finally pushed himself upright, his palms left two wet prints gleaming on the ground. The shepherd blinked at him through lashes beaded with rain, eyes glazed but present. There was a new quality in that gaze now. Not the wild, flailing terror from minutes ago, but a raw kind of focus, as if the animal was trying to thread its mind back through its body, to remember where pain ended and survival began. The paw that had been trapped lay curled in toward the dog's chest. Even in the dim light, Iron could see the swelling, angry, immediate, and a line of torn skin where metal had tried to claim it. "Hey," he said softly, his voice breaking into the hush. "Hey, buddy." His own hands were cut up, smeared with oil and dirt, a small slit on his knuckle leaking a ribbon of red that thinned and vanished into the rain. He swallowed, realizing his throat hurt from shouting over the storm. The edges of everything felt too bright, as if the world had shifted its focus to a higher, sharper resolution. He unzipped his jacket with fingers that trembled from adrenaline and cold, then shrugged it off, and wrapped it around the shepherd's torso, tugging the sides together beneath the animal's chest. The jacket darkened, heavy with water. Warmth, even a little, even just the idea of it. That was something he could give. The dog flinched at first, baring teeth with a tired, defensive reflex. Ian froze. He kept his eyes lowered, his hands open. He remembered a stray he'd tried to help as a boy, the way it had lunged and left a crescent of teeth on his wrist. He remembered his mother rinsing the wound with salt, telling him very gently that creatures in pain couldn't always tell the difference between rescue and harm. "It's okay," he murmured now, letting the rain speak louder than his voice. The shepherd's lip uncurled. Its ears twitched. A small, reluctant surrender. From the long flat of the horizon, lightning stitched white thread through the clouds. Thunder rolled over the fields a few beats later, low and tired, like a drum echoing from far away. The rails had stopped shaking. In the slackening of wind, Ian could hear the tiny, shallow sounds of the dog's breath. Not quite a pant, not quite a whine, just the quiet effort of staying here. He slid closer on his knees, bringing his body alongside the shepherd's, shoulder to shoulder, so his heat, such as it was, could bleed into the dog's side. The shepherd's nose lifted faintly, tasting his scent, filing him under something that did not immediately threaten to break. "I'm going to look at your paw," Ian said. "Just look." He reached down and touched the swollen joint with the back of his knuckles, then pressed 2 fingers very lightly against the fur just above it. The dog stiffened. Its eyes flicked to his face, searching for an explanation, and for a moment something wordless passed between them. The bargain people make with fear when they have to trust. Ian nodded, as if the dog had spoken. I know. He tore a strip from the inner lining of his jacket with his teeth and wrapped it gently around the worst of the skin tear, not to bind it tight, just to keep the raw edge from brushing against the mud. The shepherd watched him work with a solemn intensity that made his chest ache. When the makeshift bandage was done, Ian brushed wet hair back from his own forehead and tried to think past the shaking in his muscles. The car was maybe 50 meters away, its hazard lights blinking like a small lighthouse through the sheets of rain. 50 meters in good weather meant nothing. 50 meters with an injured dog and ground that slid underfoot like glass meant decisions. He glanced down the track in the direction the freight had gone. For a second, an absurd thought rose: the world will keep moving no matter what. Trains will pass, rain will fall, time will push you forward even when your lungs say they need another moment. He checked his phone. The screen was scraped, a corner spider webbed. 1 bar, no service. He slipped it into his pocket again, feeling the weight of his breath, the dull throb at the base of his skull. "Okay," he said to the dog, as if they were 2 hikers, as if they had agreed upon a plan. "Can you stand?" The shepherd shifted, gathering itself gingerly. The wrapped paw hovered, uncertain of the ground. The first attempt failed. The dog sank back with a strained whine that scraped along his nerves. Ian cupped the animal's face. The eyes were more alert now, amber kindled by pain, rainwater clinging to the whiskers like tiny glass beads. "We'll do it together," he said. He stood, slid his arms beneath the dog's chest and haunches and lifted. The weight nearly toppled him. The shepherd was all sodden fur and damp heft, and he had the leverage of a man who hadn't planned for heroism that night. He rocked back on his heels, corrected, and started forward. The ground punished each step, eager to take him down. He gritted his teeth and leaned into it, feeling the dog's heartbeat quick against his forearm. "Almost there," he lied. "Almost." They moved in a stuttering rhythm. The hazard lights blinked, each flare of orange catching the silver needles of the rain and blowing them out like candles. At 10 meters, his legs began to tremble. At 20, his lower back burned. At 30, he had to stop and lower the dog gently to the ground again. The shepherd did not fight it. It lay still, listening to the rain, eyes tracking the glow ahead as if a warm room lay there, a bed, a hand that would stroke injury into calm. Ian shook out his arms, breathed through the fire in his muscles, and lifted again. Somewhere to his left, in the dark beyond the fields, a stray dog barked twice, a distant, questioning sound, and then fell silent. Ian adjusted his grip, tightening his elbow under the shepherd's back legs so the injured paw would not dangle and knock against his thigh. He took 3 careful steps, then 3 more. He could see his breath now, misting in the cold. Their shapes, one hunched man, one bundled dog, cast short, uncertain shadows on the wet road beside the tracks. When the car was close enough to touch, his knees buckled in relief. He opened the rear door with his hip and eased the shepherd onto the seat. The dog wheezed as its body settled, then turned its head to press its nose briefly to his wrist. An accidental touch, maybe, or a thank you that lived where words didn't. Ian swallowed. He used the edge of his T-shirt to dab water from the dog's eyes and ears, then climbed into the driver's seat and turned the key. The Suzuki coughed, considered, and caught. The cabin filled with a breath of humid air that smelled like wet cloth and old plastic. He cranked the heater and checked the dim green clock on the dash. Close to midnight. The storm had worn itself into a steadier rhythm, the rain now less like an argument and more like a vow that it would be here until morning. He glanced over his shoulder. The shepherd lay on his jacket, eyes half closed, chest rising with that same careful determination. Now that the imminent horror was past, the practical question stepped in: was there an all-night clinic? The small town beyond the fields had a vet, but the sign always read 10 till 6. He tried the phone again. 1 bar flared, faded, flared. He typed "emergency vet near me" and held the phone up toward the windshield as if the sky could hear him. Nothing. Okay, he said. Plan B. He pulled away from the shoulder. The tires skated on mud for a breathless second, then found the bite of gravel. The hazard lights clicked off, and the car's headlamps carved a narrow tunnel through the rain. He drove slowly, both hands firm on the wheel, every muscle taut like wire. The railway line ran parallel to the road for a while, then veered away into the night. As the tracks dwindled to his left, a thought hit him with a delayed cruelty. How many minutes had it been between the first whimper he'd heard and the impact that never came? How thin was the thread that had not broken? In the rearview mirror, 2 small gold coins watched him, the shepherd's eyes reflecting the dashboard's glow. When the car took a gentle bend, the dog's head tipped and returned to center in that careful, uncertain way injured creatures have, braced against invisible pain. "We're going to find help," Ian promised. "Even if it's a farm, even if it's an old man with experience and an herbal salve I'll pretend to believe in, I won't leave you tonight." He was not a man who made dramatic declarations. His life, until an hour ago, had been spreadsheets and deadlines and the quiet reliability of routine. But some sentences arrive already true the moment you speak them. A cluster of lights swam into view ahead, the edge of town. Shops shuttered against the storm, a tire repair stand with its faded sign clacking softly, a tea stall half, open like a sleepy eye. He pulled into the gravel lot, left the car idling for the heat, and jogged through the rain to the stall. An old man sat inside, wrapped in a shawl, his radio humming a cricket commentary distorted by static. He looked up with a start when Ian appeared, dripping, eyes wide with urgency. "Baba," Ian said, breathless. "Do you know any vet open at night? A dog injured." "On the tracks." He pointed back toward the car. The old man peered past him, saw the shepherd, and his expression softened into the particular sympathy people save for creatures that trust us without understanding the world's machinery. "No clinic," he said, voice rough with age. "But Noor Sahib, he keeps animals. Farm goats, 2 dogs, horses, mare. Knows much. His house is behind the masjid, across the canal. Yellow gate. Wake him? He will not scold you." He poured tea into a paper cup and thrust it into Ian's hand with a practical kindness. "For your hands. You are shaking." Ian wrapped his fingers around the heat, felt it move into him like a second pulse. "Thank you," he said. The old man nodded at the dog again, as if offering a blessing. When Ian turned back to the car, the shepherd's head lifted. Those eyes, storm, tired, watchful, fixed on him and did not let go. He had not noticed the leash earlier. There wasn't one, no collar either. Not a runaway pet then. A story without an owner tonight. The thought tugged at him, a quiet ache threaded with relief. This was simpler, he told himself. No frantic family to arrive and take him from the only person who knew this exact hour of his life. He drove as the tea cooled in his palm. The road to the canal ran along a row of eucalyptus trees, their long wet leaves whispering as the wind thinned. The masjid rose out of the rain like a white lantern. Behind it, a cluster of homes slept behind painted gates. He found the yellow one and honked twice, then a third time when no light appeared. On the fourth, a bulb bloomed in the outer veranda and a door creaked open. A man in a wool cap, mid-50s, stepped out with an umbrella and the unhurried body language of someone who lives on land and therefore knows the way night works. Ayan stepped into the rain to meet him. "I'm sorry to wake you," he said. "They said you could help?" He gestured toward the car. The man's gaze followed, sharpened, and warmed all at once. "Bring him," he said. "The shed is warm. I have old towels." Together they lifted the shepherd, Noor taking the shoulders, Ayan the hips, and carried him through the gate into a shed that smelled of hay leather and a life that happens before sunrise. Noor's hands were gentle but firm. He spoke to the dog in low syllables, words made of tone, not grammar. He examined the swollen paw, the scrape along the pad, the way the joint resisted pressure. He said at last, with the calm relief of a man who has seen broken, "Badly strained, torn skin, pain, but not broken." Ayan's knees went weak with that word. He hadn't realized how hard he'd been clenching against the possibility of bones, splintered beyond a stranger's help. Noor cleaned the wound with warm water and a little iodine that smelled clean and necessary. The shepherd flinched but did not fight, eyes cutting to Ayan each time the sting rose, as if to check that the bargain still held. Bandaged and padded, the paw looked smaller, less like a threat. Noor wrapped a blanket around the dog's chest and laid another across its back, then set a bowl of water nearby. "You did right," he said to Ayan. "Most people drive faster when they hear the train." His eyes held the kind of appraisal men who work with their hands give other men who have just learned what their hands can do. Let him rest an hour, then take him to clinic when morning opens. He will walk. Not far, not proud, but he will walk. Ayan crouched beside the shepherd and put his palm lightly against the dog's side. The rise and fall had slowed. The eyes had softened from coin to candle. He exhaled, and with that breath the last, rigid layers of fear slid loose inside him, leaving space for something else to take root. He did not yet have a name for it, only the sense that the night had pressed a small, hot coal into his chest that would not go out soon. Outside the shed, the storm sighed, letting the softer, persistent rain speak. Noor made tea in a dented kettle and brought 2 cups, one for each of them, the steam curling upward like prayer. "He has no collar," Noor said, after a while. "No mark. Maybe abandoned." The word landed with the weight of a verdict. Ayan looked at the shepherd's face, the long, intelligent line of it, the way the ears, alert even in exhaustion, tilted toward the sound of their voices. He felt something in himself turn toward a decision he had not known he was ready to make. "Then he isn't abandoned anymore," he said quietly, surprising himself with how steady it sounded. In the steady hum of the rain and the smell of hay and ayn, the sentence felt like a promise the night had been waiting to hear. The shepherd shifted, as if to tuck that promise under its body for warmth. Far away, along the black ribbon of track, another horn rose and faded. A train passing someone else's field, someone else's life. Here, between steel and storm, there was a shed, a man with tired hands, another man whose pulse still beat like thunder, and a dog wrapped in a stranger's jacket, asleep at the edge of being saved. When Ayan woke, dawn was still a rumor stitched between the black clouds. The shed smelled of damp hay and the faint antiseptic tang from the iodine Noor had used. The German shepherd lay curled under a blanket, chest rising in slow, certain rhythm. For a second, Ayan let the simple proof of that breath quiet the leftover storm still running through his veins. Noor appeared with 2 steaming cups of tea and nodded toward the dog. "He will manage," he said, "but not yet walk far." Ayan drank half the cup before he realized he hadn't spoken a word since midnight. The silence felt sacred, like the pause between thunder and rain too fragile to break. He spent the next hour helping Noor clean up the shed and replace damp straw, moving with a kind of reverence. When he knelt again beside the shepherd, the dog stirred and pushed its nose weakly into his palm. That small, deliberate movement hit harder than any sound. "Hey, Rahi," he said. The name came uninvited, soft as a secret traveler. Outside, the world brightened by slow degrees. But in his mind, he kept looping back to the rails, the horn, the blur of light that had almost erased everything. By afternoon, Ayan returned with his car to take Rahi to the clinic. The drive was slow, every pothole made the dog wince. At the clinic, a young vet examined the paw carefully, complimenting Noor's quick dressing. No fractures, she confirmed, but tendons stretched badly. Rest, warmth. No running. She handed him antibiotics and smiled at the shepherd. "He's lucky." Ayan looked down at the bandaged leg. "We both are." The vet tilted her head. "You're keeping him?" He hesitated. Outside the clinic window, the same railway line shimmered in the distance, sun glinting off it like polished scars. "Yes," he said finally. He already decided that last night. Over the next days, Ayan's life rearranged itself around Rahi, his apartment filled with new routines. The clink of food bowls, the slow rhythm of daily walks, the quiet sigh of a dog learning to sleep without fear. Yet each night, he would wake at the faint echo of a train horn and see, in the dark, the flash of lights, the 10 seconds that still lived between one heartbeat and another. Sometimes he replayed it, every frame, every sound, the moment his fingers caught under the paw. The weight of the body in his arms, the roar closing in, the dive to the side, how close it had been. That nearness changed him. At work, his colleagues noticed his stillness. He smiled more softly, spoke slower, as if listening to something behind ordinary noise. When his boss scolded him for missing deadlines, he just nodded, unbothered. After all, he had seen what deadlines really looked like. A week later, during a walk, they crossed a small bridge over the same tracks. The air was clear now, the kind of blue that feels like a promise. Rahi limped but insisted on walking ahead, sniffing every post as if mapping the world anew. Ayan leaned on the railing, eyes tracing the line where steel disappeared into the horizon. He felt the rumble before he heard the horn, a distant vibration underfoot. His pulse spiked, the body remembering what the mind tried to soften. Rahi froze too, ears lifting. The train appeared far off, growing larger with mechanical inevitability. This time, Ayan didn't run. He stood still, one hand on the dog's collar. As the train roared past beneath them, wind whipping his hair and coat, he felt something loosen inside him. Not fear exactly, something closer to awe. The sound no longer carried the edge of threat, it carried reminder. He looked down at Rahi, who watched the metal beast with calm curiosity. "That's what we beat," Ayan whispered. Rahi turned his head, pressed it against his thigh, and stayed there until the last car vanished into distance. That night back home, thunder began again. Gentler this time, spring rain against the balcony glass. Ayan sat on the floor beside Rahi, running a hand through fur that was almost dry now. "You know," he murmured, "I keep thinking about those seconds. 10 of them, maybe less. That's all the time we get sometimes, to decide who we are." Rahi's tail thumped once. The sound was small but full, like agreement. Ayan smiled, leaning his head against the wall. "You remind me to choose right again." For the first time since that night, the storm outside felt like comfort instead of warning. 2 months later, the air smelled of spring again. Fresh soil, light wind, the faint hum of trains echoing somewhere far away like memories refusing to die. The railway tracks that once looked like death now shimmered under a soft evening sun, turning silver against fields of mustard yellow. Ayan walked slowly along the gravel path beside them, a leash loose in his hand, the other hand tucked in his jacket pocket. Beside him, Rahi trotted, steady now, healed but marked, the faint limp more a reminder than a wound. They moved in unspoken rhythm, like two lives that had learned to share silence. Every so often, Rahi would glance up, tongue lolling, eyes bright. Ayan would smile, sometimes without realizing it. There were still nights when he woke up sweating, the thunder of that first train pulsing through his dreams, but now, instead of panic, he'd feel a nudge at his hand. Rahi's warm nose pressing gently, grounding him in the present. At the shelter that afternoon, the volunteers had cheered when Ayan arrived. The papers were ready, adoption finalized. "Here's yours now," the woman at the counter had said, sliding the form toward him. The word yours had echoed inside his chest. For someone who'd always lived neatly, cautiously, Ian hadn't realized how much he needed something alive to need him back. Now, as they walked home, the world felt wider. Children played by the roadside, chasing kites that dipped and rose against the orange sky. Ian stopped to buy roasted corn from a vendor. Rahi sat obediently at his feet, tail sweeping the dust. "You're becoming a proper gentleman," Ian murmured, breaking a small piece and holding it down. The dog sniffed it, sneezed, then wagged as if to say, "Nice try, human." They reached the small footbridge overlooking the exact place where their fates had crossed. The rails gleamed, harmless, ordinary. Ian leaned on the railing, watching the light melt into dusk. He asked softly. Rahi's ears twitched. "I do." Ian continued. "Every time I pass, I think how strange it is how close we came to ending before we even began." The sound of an approaching train rose, faint, calm, like a heartbeat coming home. Rahi didn't flinch anymore. He stood tall beside Ian, fur ruffling in the wind. The train appeared, a long silver blur, and thundered past beneath them. This time, Ian didn't feel fear, he felt gratitude. He reached down, ran his fingers through Rahi's fur, and whispered, "We made it, didn't we?" When the last car disappeared, only the echo remained, soft, stretched, dissolving into the evening air. The sun dipped below the fields, leaving everything painted in gold. They turned toward home. The town lights flickered to life. Warm windows, faint laughter, a motorbike humming in the distance. Ian realized how much had changed in such little time. He'd started volunteering weekends at the shelter. He found himself looking for the quiet ones. The dogs that hid in corners, the ones that didn't trust hands anymore. He knew what fear looked like now, and what patience could undo. At home, Rahi padded straight to his favorite corner by the couch, circling twice before settling down. Ian filled the bowl with water, sat beside him, and let the silence stretch comfortably. On the table lay a small framed photo Noor had taken that morning. The man and the dog, both looking slightly awkward, both smiling like they hadn't done in years. Rain began again, a gentle drizzle tapping against the window. Ian leaned back, eyes half closed. "Funny," he murmured, "how the same rain that almost took us away now feels like home." Rahi lifted his head, gave a soft woof, and laid it back down on Ian's foot. Outside, thunder rolled once, not angry, just alive, and the train in the distance sang its metallic lullaby across the plains. Ian listened, heart steady. He knew life wouldn't always stay gentle, but he also knew what it meant to hold on, to run toward something instead of away. He reached down and scratched behind Rahi's ear. "Good night, traveler," he whispered. "We've both got our second chance." The dog's tail thumped once against the floor, quiet, sure, final. And somewhere between that sound and the sigh of the rain, the world felt complete again. Not because it was perfect, but because they were still here to see it.